What's going on, guys? Alex here, and today I'd like to talk to you about how psychotherapy changed my life. This episode is third part of the series of episodes about mental health. My tries to deal with my mental problems began, to be honest, very long ago, in my high school, during my high school, to be honest. It was not some kind of school psychologist or social worker. Nope. These people were horrific at their job as social workers and psychologists, and that was a teacher, the only one teacher I really liked during my high school. As a professional, as a person, he was pretty much amazing at what he did, and he helped me a lot comparing to anyone else. Because he could talk to me for hours. He could skip his lunch breaks just in order to talk to me and to help me in the way he could help me. Of course, he was not psychologist, he was not psychiatrist or therapist, licensed therapist at least, but he helped very, very, very much. And that was pretty tough times for me, because during my puberty it was really hard to exist, and especially when I was having problems in my family. I was dealing with some trauma, mental trauma, here I'm talking about, and he helped, he was talking, he was very supportive, and he offered help, but he never disclosed any information which I asked him not to do. So the environment of trust, that was, to be honest, the first time when I understood how the trust, that the trust really can exist, because before, almost everyone who I was talking to, they disclosed information which I asked them not to disclose, and that was pretty horrific, and that's why I was for a very long time, even after that, having problems with trusting people. But to proceed to the most important part of my mental healing life, is that was the second course of my university. At the end of the second course, when I started having therapy sessions, and that was the first specialist which I went to, because I suppose that my problems are not so big enough to go to see psychiatrist, but to see therapist to help me, because I understood that finally, after so many years, I understood that I really needed help, and that I really needed to someone to help me to deal with it, because that was a hard time, not only because of the university, because the different type of studies, but also because the old traumas, because of the fact that I ignored this trauma, and that I was talking about in the first, I suppose, episode of this cycle of mental health episodes. I was ignoring the problems, I wasn't dealing with them, I wasn't doing anything to help myself, and that was pretty much concerning. And that's why at the end of the second course, I started having therapy sessions. After being diagnosed with depression, I had to take a gap year, or as we call it in Latvia, an academic break. So the break during the studies, in order to complete courses I have failed, because I have failed 3 of them, I suppose. And it gave me plenty of time to think about my life choices and to deal with my mental health. My therapist advised me to visit psychiatrist, because she supposed that I was having much bigger problems, and that's why she advised to see psychiatrist, but in a very comfortable way. So I was like, okay, I'll see psychiatrist. What could go wrong? But then I was diagnosed, and it was like, okay, my problems are much harder than I supposed. So the thing essentially is that I had to work lots of stuff through that bothered me, and I had to work through lots of stuff which didn't bother me, but that was a problem, and my therapist saw that. And the same trust issues which I had, I didn't find it concerning, but my therapist supposed that's very concerning, and we have spent, I suppose, like a couple of months with dealing with this problem. And also, one of the important things for me, if we're also talking about trust issues, was that environment of trust was created there. And by that I mean that I have looked for my therapist on Facebook and other social media, and to look for whether we have any mutual friends, relatives, and other people we both know. So the information, even theoretically, couldn't be disclosed. So I was living in that way for a pretty long time, and I suppose that this tactics works pretty much like okay. It worked for me. And it was very hard to admit that I have had lots of problems. And that was really hard to talk about, because during my first session I was shaking very much, and not because I have cried, but because I would love to be honest, because I have not cried for a very long time. And that's despite the fact that many find that that's a very feminine thing to do, sometimes it helps. And right now I cannot even if I'd like to, I cannot make it like at all. And the thing is that I was shaking, and I was shaking because it was very stressful for me to disclose so much of the information that could potentially damage me, because I have kept all of these things inside, and that was really hard to talk about, to think about it, because all of these things, all of this information was buried very down in some box in the dungeon of my mind, and I have never looked in that box. And right now, during the therapy session, I had to take this box out and to open it and to tell someone what I see right there, and how it makes me feel. And also one of the most popular questions which the therapist may ask you is how it makes you feel, and that was a really strange feeling, because I never thought about it. I never thought about how it makes me feel, because I could describe some somatic symptoms. For example, like I have increased heartbeat, I breathe faster, my heart rate is faster, my blood pressure is higher. So like these things I could explain, but I have never even thought about how it made me feel, like on emotional level, because all of my emotions, I tried to bury them as deep as possible, and that was really hard. But after some time, after almost a year, I have quitted psychotherapy sessions because of the financial reasons. As I said in the previous episodes, in the first, I suppose, it's pretty expensive in Latvia for an average Latvian to go to see a psychotherapist, because I was going to the psychotherapist who was a resident, so she was not licensed yet, but she was a professional, and that's why it costed me, like as far as I remember, like 40 euros per session, so session at least once a week. Of course, there was time when we were meeting much more often, but at least one time a week, so that makes like 120 euros per month. If we're talking about average salary of 1,000 euro, it's like okay, but at that time an average salary in Latvia was something about 700 euros, and to give more than 1/7 part of your salary was like wow. It was really a lot, because I was also having like I was seeing psychiatrists, and psychiatrists costed much more. It was something about 50 euros per session, and that also was crazy. So the total I have spent on my mental health something about 200 or 300 euros per month, and my salary wasn't an average salary for a Latvian, something about 500 euros. So because of the financial issues, I have quitted seeing therapist. But the things that she has taught me, the very important things, because I have taught her that that I'd have to quit the sessions because it's a big financial burden for me. So what she thinks about that, and she told me that we need then to learn some things in order to help ourselves. So she taught me how to work with my own problems, with old ones, with new ones. She has taught me how to admit things, even the things which I wouldn't like to admit, which I'd like to ignore, and how to change myself for the best using this methodics. For example, the same cognitive behavioral therapy. She has taught me that just in order for me just in order so I can help myself, even if I couldn't afford to seeing like psychotherapist in the future, and I'm very grateful for that. And of course, she has named a couple of books of literature, obviously, and it helped. And these kind of books, it isn't something very popular, for example, like Atomic Habits or something like that. It's not books with the fancy cover, but these books are purely professional, and she has named that just in order for me to understand how my problems work from the therapist side, because our relationship was more of a kind patient-doctor, but also it was a talk from like professional to professional, even despite the fact that I was only the second-year medical student, but still. It was very, very strange at first, because I was like, you know that I'm only a second-year student, I'm not like a resident or something. And she's like, okay, but if that makes you feel like more comfortable, then we'll make it that way. And if we are talking about my problems, which we have worked through, my behavior was incorrect in many, many, many reasons. The first thing, of course, that was something of a toxic productivity when I was trying to get the best results, even despite of the time limits, even despite this subject wasn't relevant or it was simply stupid to learn something more when I was having lots of depth in studies. And with this toxic productivity that I was trying to do everything like I can, we have worked it through. And she has explained that. She has explained that from the student side, because she also was a student, from the professional side. And that was really important for me to hear that from someone who also was a medical student and who has studied, who also had a very similar experience to what I'm having right now. And that's why I'm very grateful for that as well. Also, the thing which I was dealing with was very stupid perfectionism. It was more like an obsession, to be honest, because the perfectionism maybe in many ways, but my perfectionism was like in such small and irrelevant things that it was simply dumb to follow that. Let me explain this a little bit more. It was more like I need that every single one of my pens and pencils which I'm having on my table should be perfectly parallel, the paper should be 90 degrees here, and everything was in that way. I could spend like literally hours simply putting folders on my desktop, on my computer desktop, just in order them to be in a perfect row. And that was simply dumb. And this stupid perfectionism, we had to work it through. And the whole idea of this stupid perfectionism was like, I was controlling the things which I can control, because before I wasn't able to control my life like as well. That was the problems of my like teenage years and puberty, because I couldn't control anything. My parents controlled every single move that I made, and even when I wasn't at home, they still controlled me. And that was a really big and hard thing to admit, that's like a compensation from my future, from my past traumas, and that in future I could improve that and not be so obsessed with so little things, so irrelevant things, and focus on more important things in future. Of course, the another problem which I had that I was following to other people's lead, and that was really hard to admit. But the thing was that every single person which I have met and who we were like something as friends, like if they wanted to go somewhere, I would go there as well. If they'd like to go in the place A and I would like to go to the place B, I would still go to the place A, not because like I'd like to go there, but simply because I was following the lead of others people. And that was also a problem which we had worked through. And the whole idea of this problem, as we have summarized from a couple of sessions, was that I wasn't sure in my own decisions. So the thing is that I needed someone to lead me, and that was also a very stupid behavior because of my past traumas. Next thing was, and that was the most concerning, one of the most concerning from my therapist side, is that I wasn't expressing my emotions like at all. The same example as from our first session, when I was simply shaking because I was talking about some of my problems with someone, which I hasn't done for a long period of time. I was holding on my emotions. All of it was I was burying that somewhere deep in myself, and to open up that was really hard. And even after after that sessions, after we have talked through all of it, I began such type of maybe very dumb practice, but it works for me. That my friend and I was going to the forest just simply to scream anything, like simple scream, like screaming some words, like anything, just to express ourselves. I also try to express myself more through the drawings, to express myself through almost every single thing which I can think about in art, and so on. So like my emotions wouldn't be buried. And also because I wasn't expressing myself, she has taught me that I need to express my thoughts also somewhere as well, because the thoughts which keep returning in my head, like recursion, simply these thoughts doesn't help at all. It's a burden, and we should get over it. And that's why I started some type of diary. It was not a regular diary, it was like more of a diary that I have written there just when I had some thoughts which concerned me, some thoughts which were important for me and which keep returning into my head. That's why I have begun some type of journal, and this journal obviously I was having in English language, just in order for my parents couldn't understand that, also trust issues, hey, and I have written there from time to time. Sometimes I could have written there every single day of the week, but sometimes I could write there once a week. But still, it helped. That also I began having lots of lists, like lists of the things I'd like to buy, lists of the places I'd like to visit, lists of the films which I have watched, just in order to clear my head out of all of these thoughts, in order my mind to be occupied with more important things which I need to be focused on right now. Also, the thing which was very concerning and which you have obviously understood is that I have had trust issues. That's why, because of this trust issues, I was having my journal in the English language, obviously. Because of that, I was visiting like private psychiatrists and private psychotherapists who has made their notes on paper and not in the electronic system, so no one could know that I have visited them. And also that's why I have researched my own psychotherapist and psychiatrist just in order to see whether we have some common acquaintances. So that was a really big issue. And it took me much longer time to adjust that I need to start trusting people. And I began with my friends, I began with people I felt that I need to trust because they trusted me, and it really worked. It was a really impressive thing from my perspective, that I can trust someone and someone trusts me, and that they don't betray me for like at all. Because for a very long period of time I wasn't trusting someone with any sensitive information, and I was somewhere burying it inside my head, deep in myself, and that was really hard. Also, one of the things which I suppose is very important for you to understand how many problems I've had, is that I was having both my therapy sessions and my psychiatrist sessions in Latvian language, not in my native language, which is Russian, just because I couldn't talk about my problems in my native language, because I felt that that's not how I was raised, and that was not correct to talk about my own problems with some strangers, and so on. But when I was talking in Latvian, which is the language which I'm learning in, it helped me, because it looked like that I was describing some patient of mine and not myself, and that really helped. And right now I can talk about it in any language, and right now even the fact that I am having such type of podcast, I'm having this type of episode which is dedicated to my own problems, which I couldn't admit for a very long period of time, I find it really impressive, and I'm very glad, I'm very happy that I have made such a great work with myself, with my mind, and that it really helped, and that right now I'm in much better position than I was a couple of years before. Also, very concerning topic was self-harm and thoughts of suicide, but these types of thoughts, it was I had them because I was feeling that that's the only thing which I can control in my life. I know it sounds very stupid, but when you cannot control literally anything in your life, then self-harm and thoughts of suicide, it's like an obvious choice. And especially if a person has some other depressive thoughts, and maybe his genetics is more dedicated towards having depression. And we have worked that through. We was working through this through the whole period of time. When I was visiting the therapist, and also psychiatrist helped with that, with the pharmaceutical help. And despite the fact that I'm still being diagnosed with such type of disease as depression, recurrent depression, because I have quitted my therapist, as I said in previous episodes, like in May the year 2021. That's why right now theoretically it's a recurrent depression. But the thing is that despite the fact that I still use the medications, despite the fact that I still need the medications, I feel much better comparing to that person who I was by the end of the second year. Right now, despite the fact that my depression is having a third anniversary already, I have changed a lot. I have changed the job which I really hated to the one I really enjoy doing. I have dealt with many of my personal problems. I am not ignoring the most of the problems right now. I have excluded toxic people from my life, which I suppose should do every single person, because toxic people, like not like every single people you might say that is toxic, but I'm talking about very toxic people who is very difficult to exist with in a similar room. And I have excluded them, and I have surrounded myself with the people I really enjoy spending time with, and which I really like as a person, as a personality, and that's find it very, very important, and that was a very hard decision to make. Also, right now, I listen to myself very, very often, every single day, every single minute, what I want, if I want it. That's the questions which I ask myself almost every single minute, just in order to understand how I can help myself doing something. Of course, sometimes I want to simply procrastinate, scroll through TikTok or YouTube, and not to do the stuff I really need to do. But during these periods of time, I can tell myself that, and I can deal with myself and argue that right now I need to do that work, and after that, if and when I have spare time, we can lay down and scroll TikTok for some periods of time. And that listening to myself and dealing with myself, with dealing with my emotions, is also, I find it also very important. And I know it maybe sounds very funny that I find every single point very important, but it really is so, because all of these points was very concerning for me before. And also, right now, I place myself on number one comparing to others. Of course, not in every single day, not every single minute, in every single situation, but right now it's an adequate egocentrism. So I don't say yes to every single thing which I'm proposed. For example, if I'm having the next day like a 24-hour shift and someone is inviting me to the bar to drink for all night long, I will say no now, because before most probably I would say yes, because I was such type of person and I was surrounded with such type of people who could allow that and who couldn't accept that someone can say no to them. And that's why right now it is so. Also, one of the things which I have doubt is accepting losses and imperfections in myself and in others. That's the quality which I had to work for a very long period of time, and during the session and even after my psychotherapy sessions, because accepting losses and the imperfections is like accepting life, because life is never perfect, even when you are a healthy millionaire, because then you would have some imperfections surrounding you. You would still see losses, like in your bank account, your relatives could be sick and so on and so on. And that's important for every single person, because our world is built that way, that it's not perfect and every single one will have losses. The only thing we can do is to try to prevent them, and to accept all of these losses and imperfections in ourselves and in others, in others. And that's very, very good quality, which I'm very proud of. Of course, if we are talking about psychotherapy and how it really works, how it really is going on, then from my personal experience is that you're very nervous during your first session. Your thoughts are mostly about the question, do I really need this? Why have I came here? And why have I come here? And all of these thoughts, and right after you enter like the room with your therapist, and she or he asks you, why have you came here, and you start answering, and you start talking, and you understand that you really need to be here, because every single one have problems that this person needs help with. And psychotherapist works in the way, well, of course, it depends on the diagnosis and the problems, but mostly the idea is to accept yourself, to deal with your problems, and to accept that even if you have had some kind of trauma, even if you have had some kind of difficulties before, it doesn't mean that you will have the same type of experience in your future, that you should work in order to prevent that, and that really works. And you are having like the session of 45 to 1 hour time mostly, and straight after that then the therapist could prescribe medications. Therapist could recommend you to go to see psychiatrist in order to prescribe the medications if they suppose that you need to see the psychiatrist. And it's all done in mostly I cannot say for all the psychiatrists, but in most cases it is done in a very friendly and caring way, and the therapists which I was working with, it is very professional people. It was very professional and ethical people, and that's one of the most important things in psychiatry and in psychotherapy, so people can trust the specialist they are working with. And I find that they are doing very great job, because lots of people are having trust issues, and lots of people are having issues similar to mine. And I really do hope that you can deal with that, because there is lots of methods, but I really hope that if you're trying to deal with it, you will choose the method which will work for you and which is scientifically proven that it works. But anyway, even if placebo pill works for you, take it. Anyway, my life was divided into before and after, and this golden line of before and after is this academic year or a gap year between my second and third course of med school. And now I feel that despite I'm still having lots of problems, despite I am still meeting lots of imperfections in myself and in others, I can accept that, and my life and perception of the life is much better than it was before. And I suppose that myself from the 3 years before would be very proud of the things which I have achieved right now, both in academic way and in the way of the mental health and mental stability. So I find that that's more than enough to a short description of how psychotherapy has changed my life. It still is changing, but I'm still working with it. It's a long run, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I hope that this episode will help you somehow. Ask for help if you need, and hear you next week.